Okay. Nancy, could you tell me about where you are in the family, what number you are, and uh, about your name and.
Okay. Well, I was born the 11th child, the 7th girl, between Cora and Margaret. And I was born May 12, 1937. They tell me I had an unusual birth in that I was born in an ambulance coming from the hospital. Mom had been having some problems with her pregnancy and decided to go to the hospital to deliver. And coming back home, or when she got there, they said that I wouldn't be born for a couple of weeks, so they sent her back home, and I was born alongside the road at Lyburn Hill with the aid of Miss Blankenship, the community midwife, and the ambulance driver. And
Were you the only one not born at home?
as far as I know, yes.
Okay. And how about your name? Is there any significance to why they named you Nancy, or?
Well, I was born or named after my great-grandmother, Nancy Ryan, and that's on Mom's side.
Okay. Can you tell me about some early childhood experiences growing up in a large family?
When I was small, I couldn't see very well and didn't realize it, and nobody else realized it. So it made me go into a little world all my own. And Frank taught me how to play a song on the piano when I was about 4. And the name of that song was I've Got Spurs That Jingle, Jangle, Jingle. And I used to bang on the piano after I got a little taste of it, all for hours on end. And Dad would sit in the chair right next to the piano and never say a word. He never told me to quit. So he had to have had a lot of patience. I've got to give him that, or he tuned me out some way or other. And I appreciate that patience in him. And also, I learned from Mom hard work and how to be God-fearing and loving and forgiving. She always taught us that. And Dad, the same. He was a hard worker and taught us to work hard. When I wanted money, I'd go to Mom, and she would send me to Dad. And I would bargain with him or make a deal with him to pay back whatever I borrowed from him. And I'd pay back most of it, some of it. Mom told us to be sure and try to do 3 things in our life. And that was to learn to drive a car, to type, and to play some kind of musical instrument if we liked it. And I did all 3 eventually. And then Sis was a big influence on me. She was sort of a mentor. She was an example for us in being a Christian. And I think she was a big influence on us, on me anyhow, I know. So I'm grateful to have been a part of the family for that reason. I'd like to say a couple of things about Jim. Jim's always been special to me. He was always my protector growing up. And as long as he was around, why, I didn't fear anybody. He pulled me out of the water one time when I thought I was drowning, and other times that he came to my rescue, you know. One time a horse ran over me and he went through the manure and carried me home with all the mess and
How old were you?
Probably 6, 7.
Oh.
And he just was always there, seems like, you know, whenever I needed him. Like in high school, he gave me his lunch money a lot of times when I didn't have any lunch money. He'd give me his. So I've always remembered that, those things, you know. And
Your other brothers were much older.
they were older, yeah. So I was around Jim more, so Larry. I met George in '52. He just got out of service, came home from Korea, and his brother had married Violet Wells, our first cousin, and we visited over there, and that's how come me to get acquainted with him. So we started dating, and we were married in '55. I graduated from high school in '54, and we married January 4th, '55. And
How did Granny and Grandpa feel about you being married right after high school?
well, they weren't too happy about it, but they consented. When they had to sign the papers for me, and I thought Mom would be the one to cry, but it was Daddy that cried rather than Mom.
Hmm.
So that was kind of neat. Then Joy was born July the 9th in '56, and then Pamela was born in August 13th of '58. And then Brian was born February 28th of '61. So we had our 3 little bundles of joy. And our kids brought a lot of joy and happiness to us, and still do. Joy married Darrell Creel in '74. Darrell was a minister in the Church of God of Prophecy at the time, and they ministered in Israel for about 7 years, and all 3 of their babies were born there in Jerusalem.
And their children's names are?
Linda, Beth, and Nathan. And they're presently ministering in New Hampshire. Pamela married Thomas Boyd in '78, and they have 4 little boys, and their names are David, Ryan, Brendan, and Andrew. And they're a lot of fun and very special, all of them.
So you have 7 grandchildren?
7 grandchildren.
5 boys and 2 girls.
Mm-hmm. Let's see now. I need some time. George died October the 8th, 1988, in an accident in California. And Brian died December the 23rd, 1992.
How long were you and George married?
We were married 34 years.
When did Grandpa have much to say to George when you all decided to get married?
Not a whole lot. There's an interesting thing that happened before George had come home when he was in the Navy on a furlough, He was about 20 years old, and I was only about 11 at the time. And he was drinking, and he and Winnie Wells borrowed a log truck, and lost control of it and ran into the store building there at Davin and tore the building up. Well, that caused Dad to meet George prematurely. And so several years later, when I grew up, he came back home, and we started dating. And the first date we had, he was very nervous, needless to say. He didn't know what Dad was going to say to him. But he didn't say anything. He just grunted at him when he walked through the house, and that was all there was to it. And I think he liked him okay. He didn't have a lot of reaction. You know how Dad was. He didn't show a lot of emotion. So that was kind of an interesting thing that happened. We hadn't met at that time. I only knew of him. But then a few years later, when he came back home from service, I met him when I was about 15, I guess. We were married when I was 17.
Well, I've seen pictures of him when he was young, so I know there was more than you that was chasing him, interested in him.
Uh-huh.
Because even though he was an awfully handsome man.
Yes, he was.
The girls around there.
Fonzie type.
Yeah. Yes, he was cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything, any particular time during your childhood that you can remember feeling very satisfied and comfortable and peaceful with being in a family, a big family?
There was one time in particular, we were still farming at Cold Spring, and I was about 6 years old, I guess. It was time for lunch, and Mom, when she came to the farm, or to the place where the field we called it, she'd bring a skillet and potatoes or some food to fix for lunch. So this one particular day, she built a fire, cooked some potatoes, and we played on, there was a large sawdust pile there, and it was perfect to play in. So we played on the sawdust pile. Daddy was sitting under the tree, wiping the sweat off of his head. I remember distinctly this thought and feeling I had. Mom was cooking our lunch and humming or singing. She was singing. She used to sing that, "Give me the roses while I live." And I remember this feeling of security and happiness and peace that I felt at that moment. You know, the weather was beautiful. I had parents that loved me, and I was on a wonderful sawdust pile, jumping up and down. So that's just one moment I remember in particular that was special. I forgot to mention that when George and I were married, we left for Detroit right away because that's where his job was. Needless to say, it was like going to a foreign land for me because I'd never been out of West Virginia hardly. And but we settled, and I learned to get along. And Joy was born in Detroit, and then we bought a house when Pam came along and didn't get it finished in time for her birth. So I came back to West Virginia to stay with Mom until Pam was born. So Pam was born at Mann Hospital in Mann. And then Brian was born in Dearborn, Michigan. So, that's the story of the kid's birth. Nick and Irene played a big part in my life. When I was a teenager, Irene had gotten sick and he needed someone to help him, so I stayed with them, and they in turn helped me through school. And so they played a big part in my life. And George and I courted at their house. And I used to babysit Peggy and help out different ways. So I was very close to Nick and Irene. They were very special too.
Where did they live then?
They lived across the road there, where Nick lives now. And this was in the early 50s. Can't remember exactly what day, but early 50s.